After the last few videos, I think I need some help. I'm going to call on the greatest C64 repairer that I know.
Huh?
No, not you.
Oh.
Hello, welcome back to More Fun Fixing It. This is the 5th episode of this mini series of C64 repairs before I move on to the silver labels. And so far, my batting average has been, well, let's call it poor. 3 out of the last 4 machines I've failed to diagnose simple repairs early on and turn them into epic repairs when they could have just been very simple. So I was chatting with Adrian from Adrian's Digital Basement, and he was giving me some advice on an earlier C64 repair video, and I thought, well, why don't we get Adrian involved in this? He mentioned that he hasn't got any C64s to repair at the moment, and I've got loads. I did offer to send him some, but it's quite a long way to send them and probably wouldn't work out very well financially. But I said, why don't I be your eyes and hands and you can fix the C64 on my bench? And Adrian has very, very kindly agreed. So this one here is the 5th of the series of 5 C64, regular C64s that I've got to repair. There's also a series of 5 silver labels after this that I've got to repair, culminating in a very low serial number silver label, which is something that we've seen before on my channel, but we'll get to that at a later date. But this one is in really nice condition, and I featured this one on a previous triage episode where it passed a dead test, but the basic ROM came up faulty. So let's jump into this and see if we can fix this together. I'm sure we won't need anyone else's help. This video is sponsored by PCBWay. Now, you'll know PCBWay for their PCB manufacturing, assembly, and even 3D printing, but one of my favourite features on their site is the shared projects section. It's like a community library where makers and engineers post their PCB designs. You can browse through thousands of projects, get inspiration for your own builds, or even order the boards directly. If you've designed something yourself, you can upload it and share it with the world, and even earn a little commission when other people order your design. It's a brilliant way to give back to the community, discover clever design ideas, and maybe even make your own project more widely used. So next time you're on PCBWay, check out the shared project section. You'll be amazed what people are building. So I've got everything I need on the bench here. I've got my multimeter ready to go for voltages, and I've got an oscilloscope over here, which you'll be able to see on the screen. And my eyes, I've got thermal cameras and all kinds of things. And I'll go through my initial method of diagnosing C64, the first impressions and everything, and then we'll hand it over to Adrian. So the first thing I do after a quick inspection of the board to make sure that there's no actual problems with, leaking capacitors or exploded voltage regulators or a broken fuse, is turn it on and have a look what the output is. And on this one, it's a black screen. Let's press on, and the next thing I will do is, check voltages. Right, so first of all I check over on the voltage regulators to make sure that 5 volts is coming out of the 5 volt regulator and 12 volts is coming out of the 12 volt regulator, and they're both perfect. I also like to check on a logic chip, any random one will do. Oops, 5 volts is coming out there, and then this slot over here on the edge connector, there's 5 volts there, and then check the AC on the next slot along, and there's mostly 12 volts coming out there. So now if look at the capture. I don't know when that happened, whether it was on the switch on, but I've got this screen. Let's turn it off and on again. Okay, we've got some random stuff going. Okay, I'm going to pull the SID chip because I know there's no bad voltages in here, but just in case I short something, and it's not necessary to risk it. So, I don't know if we're going to get the same sort of thing, but it could be causing a problem. Right, we're not getting that horrible sound anymore. Okay, my first impression, and I don't know if Adrian will agree with this, is that the PLA has gone bad and it's selecting rubbish. Different chips are being selected all at the same time, and that's just trashing everything on the bus. And the next thing to test is reset and clock. Right, so the reset first, let's try that, and 3, 2, 1, go. So that looks like a good reset to me. 3, 2, 1, go. And the clock on pin 39 is 980 kilohertz. I think that's all right. Because I suspect the PLA, I'm going to check the output enable on the ROMs. So starting with the character ROM. That's the character ROM's output enable. And this is the kernel ROM. Very regular. And this is the basic ROM. I'll just turn it off, turn it back on. And both times I've got the normal blue screen. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is stick in some diagnostics, and I've got a DesTest Max here with, it's also got the normal diagnostics, Dead Test and DesTest Max from Matt Desmond. So we'll start with the normal diagnostics. And I just get black screen, but I don't always get a black screen on this. I've had this actually run. There, look. Oh, wow, psychedelic. PLA test has come up bad. This is the no RAM check version, so that's quite interesting. Okay, here we go. This is looking really, really normal now. And it's crashed. Quite a fun one. So let's try, this is DesTest Max, unexpected IRQ. And then crash. Yeah, it's just crashing each time this time. Grey border, what's grey border? Fail testing Vic. Fail testing Vic. Okay. This is my test machine. Lots of stuff is socketed in this one, and forgot to test it. It's working. Okay, that's all working. And the VIC 2 is okay. Phew, that could have been a short video. I will, before I put it back in, give it a contact cleaner blast. I don't have Deoxit. It's very expensive over here in the UK. Just see if that made any difference. That might be dead test. Not doing anything now. Right. Randomly, it's working now. And it's crashed. So, there we go, Adrian. I'm in your hands. What would you like me to do first? If this was me, I'd probably just pull the PLA out because it's always the PLA. But I've been burnt so many times recently that it could be something, well, it could be anything really. But this is a new one on me. I've not seen one that's quite as interesting as this for a while. So I hope you enjoy it. Let me know.
Well, hi Lee and everyone else watching. So I've watched the video that Lee sent over of his initial diagnostic exercises, and I think basically, well, I have an idea. Let's take a look at one of the frames from the video. Okay, so Lee was running the diagnostic ROM here, the one that doesn't do the RAM check, and it looked like this thing was kind of running, but obviously was having some major issues. Now, right off the bat, whenever I have a Commodore 64 that seemingly kind of works, but sometimes you get a black or solid blank screen, but it has the normal basic colors, and then other times it's just misbehaving, I've found that that's the basic ROM. Pretty much the basic ROM goes bad, and it kind of gets selected when it shouldn't, and it's just acting up. Now, in this particular test, it actually got to the point where it was able to do some checksums. Well, I happen to know that the kernel checksum here, B6C7080A, I mean, is correct for a Rev 3 kernel, and it matches down the bottom. And I happen to also know the character ROM, which is the same on every 64, is always F3, F7, F8. But the basic ROM, on the other hand, I don't think this is correct. So all 64s have the exact same BASIC. There's only one version of BASIC on the 64, and it is BASIC version 2, Commodore BASIC version 2. In fact, that's the one that recently got released by Microsoft when they released the source code for Microsoft BASIC. That project on GitHub, if I remember correctly, can compile to the exact version of BASIC for the Commodore 64, and happens to be the one that's used on some PETs as well. Anyways, 0E7491 is not the correct checksum for BASIC. And because these other two checksum routines are working, the character ROM is correct and the kernel ROM is correct, kind of implies it's the basic ROM. And as I said, I've sort of run into this problem before where the basic ROM kind of is misbehaving in a way that's crashing the system, it's corrupting the bus. When you plug in the dead test cartridge, or even des test, it's supposed to disable all of the ROMs, and it does that through the XROM signal, and that goes to the PLA. But when the basic ROM, or when any of these ROMs, when basic ROM is dying, it's sort of corrupting the bus, like it's getting selected when it shouldn't be. I don't exactly know what's happening, but my hunch is that. Now, also another thing you need to do, Lee, well, what I recommend at least, is I know you took a look at the chip select line going to the ROMs. That's coming from the PLA. But ideally, what you really need to do is take a look at the pinout of the PLA. Look at all the outputs on it and check every single output. If you have a non-functional system, for instance, it's not running code. So a good example would be if you are, say, running the des test or dead test cartridge. Well, those cartridges should never select the ROM chips. So the ROM select lines should always be high. And if it's at like 1.7 volts or whatever, then what's going to happen is the chip will get selected when it shouldn't be. That's the failure mode of those MOS PLAs, is the chip select lines often start drifting down. So instead of going up to 5 volts, they're at like 1.9, something like that. And in fact, on your scope, when you were doing the testing, I noticed that, it's going all the way to ground, but then the highs are only like at 3 point something volts. So I think it's already kind of on the way to being dead. What I'm saying is that it is my hunch that that 64 has a bad basic ROM. And I really feel that that diagnostic ROM screen with the checksums was the key to figuring that out. It's nice that it was able to run a little bit, but yeah, I think that it's basically either getting selected when it shouldn't be, so the PLA, but I'm pretty sure you looked at the chip enable line and it was like at 3 point something volts and going down to 0 volts. That should be fine. It's usually like around like 1.5, 2 volts, like that's where you start to have issues. So I just really feel that that chip itself is causing all this trouble. And I think the smoking gun is the checksum. So I would, as the very next step, pull out that chip and check it in another machine or just see what happens. Because if the chip removed, what you should get when you power on a 64 is just the blue border and the dark blue background with nothing else. Like you won't have any functional basic, but then it shouldn't cause any more crashing like in Des Test Max. So that's kind of the test. And you might have to, or this machine might have other issues as well, like multiple faults, but I'm going to say this is a good place to start. And also I was going to add, because the thing is mostly working, for instance, like with the cartridges, you're kind of seeing text and stuff is all kind of good. It kind of tells me that the VIC is not bad. You don't really even need to bother testing that, even though you already did test it, but I wouldn't even have bothered with that, only because it seems to be mostly working. And to be honest, with the 64, the clocks, you don't even really need to test the clocks, because if you don't, well, you have a video signal that's working, Even when it's black screen, you know, you have a clear, solid video signal. And then, of course, with the cartridges working, you kind of get a working system. Well, you wouldn't even get any of that if the clocks were bad, right? Because without the video signal is derived entirely from the clock. Everything is derived from the same master clock. So if the master clock is bad, you're not going to have color. You're not going to have working video. You're not going to have a lot of things on the 64. But yeah, you checked reset. That looked perfect, unlike one of the machines you recently worked on that was not perfect. And yeah, so I think next step, yank out that basic ROM. that's my hunch right there. All right, back to you, Lee.
Very, very interesting. Thank you, Adrian. Right, so my next step is to take out the basic ROM. But Adrian also said to check the outputs on the PLA. And I've got my map here for the PLA here. And what I've actually done before I started recording this part is I compared the PLA signals on my scope between a working system and this system. And apart from a couple of address lines that were a bit funky depending on how the system had crashed, the PLA actually looks exactly the same as the working machine. So I think my initial suspicion that the PLA was at fault was probably wrong. We're still to be proved one way or the other, and I think Adrian's right that the basic ROM is the one that we need to look at. So let's get that out. And yeah, I didn't spot that. I need to write down those checksums somewhere. I didn't know that I wasn't aware that the kernel had different versions and revisions. So there's always so much to learn. I'm tempted to pop this out. It feels like it's a really good pull. Yeah, it's just coming out. Yeah. Perfect. So the legs on this are super short, but I'm going to stick it in the test machine now. And one of the most important lessons that Adrian's ever taught me is to make sure that whatever you're using to test something, like a test machine, is working first. Boy, do we not like getting bitten by that one. Right. That's on and working. How's your luck, Adrian? He's right! Although it's a different fault in this machine. I'm just going to lean on this socket just in case it's not making good contact. Yeah, but that basic ROM is gone. So we could both be right. It could be the PLA as well. Now, according to Adrian's theory, the faulty machine should boot up now with a blue, or with the same screen as we've just seen, with a light blue border and dark blue background. So without the ROM in, what does it do? And it should run the tests. It should run diagnostics. Black screen. We've got more than one fault. Okay, it's getting interesting. Let's try des test. Switch. Nothing. Completely nothing. No black screen at all. Oh, no image at all. It doesn't want to do anything now. Okay, I think for the next stage, it'd be easy for me to just say, right, Adrian, over to you. What would you do next? But I think it'd be probably wise and prudent for me to just have a little bit of a scope around of the memory, especially. Although this is Texas Instrument memory, I think this is, and I don't think that goes wrong. There's no MOSP logic. Yeah, this is a weird one. And it's funny that before I was able to get it to do something. I was able to get it to boot in a crashed way, but now it won't boot at all. Oh! It's booted without the basic ROM in the right way. What about game ROM? Kung Fu Flash time. I was doing something every time with that in. I'm thinking now kernel ROM. So let's put diagnostics in. Come on, we've got to get something on diagnostics. I want a random diagnostics again. Oh, it's now a ZX Spectrum. It's failed with the lower RAM. Oh no, we're back to a psychedelic dance party. Right, I'm going to keep switching this off and on until I get a screen that might give us a hint of what's going on. Oh, just a flash of Des test. And the grey border that it shows is failed testing Vic. That's as much as I can get out of it. So yeah, let's have a quick look at the DRAM. Just so that you've got a little bit more information to go on. Oh, it's running. This is what makes me think that the RAM is not at fault. And now it's crashed. It's so random. Okay, well, we've already got something. On U9, pin 2 should be showing more data than that. And this is pin 2 on U10. That's what I would expect. And U11, U12, U21, U22, U23. Oh, similarly, maybe, I don't know. And U24. Okay, so that was the data in the right pin on U9 is high. I think that's right. Yeah. And RAS. So the row address strobe is fine. A0, A2, A1. Yeah. 5 volts. A7. Right, A7. A5. That looks a little funky, but I'm sure that's actually okay. A4 is this one. A4. A3. A6. And then data out. Again, looks squashed. And CAS. So that was just one DRAM, and I think that one's faulty myself, or something connected to it. This is one of those ones where I kind of start to struggle because there's no obvious smoking gun. There's a few hints at things, and yeah. Well, I'd be interested to see what you think, Adrian. Good luck. So back to the digital basement.
All right, hi Lee. Sorry about the potato vision camera, but I'm up in my office because I'm in the middle of working on some stuff. I thought I'd record a little video response to your latest troubleshooting exercise. So good, I was right about the basic ROM. That checksum definitely pointed to the basic ROM being bad, but unfortunately, as you just showed, taking it off the board didn't really result in a working system. So as I suspected, this machine actually had multiple faults. I have a feeling if you put a working basic ROM in this computer, occasionally it might actually start and go to basic, but then probably crash, just like it's doing with all the other cartridges. Now, a few things. You have already validated that the PLA outputs look correct. What we're looking for when you're looking at the outputs is that the high outputs of all of the PLA chip select lines that go to the various components gets to, I don't know, at least 3.3 volts or higher. Ultimately, right, it's a TTL part, so it should be up at 5 volts, but around 3.5 is fine as well. The failure mode, right, is that if you see activity, but the high is, say, 2 volts, that's too close to the threshold voltage of the chip select lines of some of the ICs, especially as the ICs age. So it's really important to validate, and you didn't show it on camera, you just said that you did check it against another machine, that those lines are going all the way up to, like I said, 3.3 volts. The only thing that really matters are the outputs. I mean, obviously the inputs going into the PLA are correct, but or matter, I guess. But the point is the outputs should never be stuck low or stuck going between low and like 2 volts or 1.8 volts, because that will 100% create problems. And the funny thing is, when you have a chip doing that, it's quite possible that you could put that in another machine and it will work, but in another computer it won't. And that's because the threshold of the chip select, not selecting the chip, which is when the signal is high, might be too close to that threshold where some chips will get turned on sometimes and other chips won't. So that voltage differential between the high and the low in the PLA output is very important. So if you've already validated that and it is not down around 2 volts on any of the outputs, then excellent. It looks like to me what's happening on the machine now is a bus conflict, and it's either happening on the address bus or data bus or both. Now, you were checking around the RAM chips, but remember, that's a different set of address lines. That's the multiplex address lines, but the data lines are actually the same ones that go to everything else on the board. But when you're looking for a bus conflict, right, you're looking for a period of time where 2 chips are trying to write to the bus at the same time. So it's not going to be there most of the time. You're going to see like normal activity. But then all of a sudden, if suddenly one chip thinks, hey, I'm selected, I'm going to start talking on the bus at the same time as something else, then, it's going to write, one's going to write high or try to pull the line high, and one's going to pull it low. And that's when you might start to see weird thresholds. Now, part of the problem is that TTL logic, which the C64 is all those chips have a very strong ability to pull down to ground. And when something is trying to pull the bus high, well, that's going to be overridden by another chip just pulling it down to ground immediately and very hard. Meaning, if you're looking for a bus conflict between 2 chips, you won't necessarily see it because, say, the computer's trying to execute code out of the ROM, and the kernel ROM's trying to write whatever, some highs and lows to the bus. Well, if some other chip is like, oh, I'm selected as well now, and I'm going to write to the bus too. Well, if the ROM is trying to write a high signal, like 5 volts or whatever, and the other chip that's erroneously selected is going to write a low, well, all you're going to see on the oscilloscope is a low. And unfortunately, those are really, really tough problems to see. So if you can't see anything by looking at all the address lines on the CPU and all the data bus lines, if everything looks completely perfect, the only thing I could start to suggest is, unfortunately, removing chips. And because the PLA is generating all those chip select lines, and you've already ruled out that it's not the PLA erroneously turning on any chips, because the chip select, when it's not selecting the chip, is up around 3.3 or higher, then it might be just a failure of one of these other chips on the board where it thinks it's being selected when it's not, like irrespective of what the PLA is actually doing. Not to mention, I mean, that could be an input problem on the chip select pin on that particular bad IC where it thinks it's being turned on when it shouldn't be. But you can also have output drivers on any of the chips that's sort of in a bad, weird state where it's kind of biasing the bus or doing something weird. And those are problems if the bias thing is happening, like where one of the chips is sending maybe a weird bias voltage out of one of the output pins. Maybe you can see that with the oscilloscope. So it's worth really examining carefully the address bus and the data bus. And if you do find, say, one line that looks a little weird, like it's, compared to a working 64, it's a little high or low, and it's just something strange, the only solution at that point is to start cutting the pins on the various ICs that are essentially on that same shared bus line. Now, I think in another video, you did a technique where you desolder the via, or you remove the solder and you try to float the pin. That works too. It's just hard, and you have to be very careful that, it doesn't intermittently touch or something like that. Obviously, I just use a method where I just use side cutters and I just cut the pin on the chip if I suspect a bad address or data bus line on, all the chips. And then when I have ruled out and figured out which chip it is, I just resolder all the other ones back together. So, if the chip leg comes out, goes into the motherboard, you just like cut it right here, it snaps apart, and then you just sort of push it together and put a blob of solder on it, and you're off to the races. But yeah, I think that would be my only suggestion at this point. You're really in a pickle. This is a tough problem. And the fact that Des Test runs and was like kind of running and the RAM was all checking correctly, I think you don't have a problem with your RAM at all. Theoretically, you could have a marginal chip that's kind of coming and going, but I don't know. It doesn't really seem like it to me. I feel like it seems like a data bus or address bus getting trashed intermittently, which is why the system kind of works and kind of doesn't. And it would have been awesome if it was the basic ROM that was doing that. That's why when you pulled it out, obviously now it's, that chip is bad, but the reality is you put it in another machine, it just shows up as bad every time, and it doesn't seem to be trashing the bus on that other machine. I assume if you run the cartridges on the other one, everything will work fine, like Des Test and Dead Test. So yeah, it's all a matter of finding what's trashing the bus. Now, of course, I just know from experience too, there are plenty of other scenarios, because there are logic ICs that do all sorts of things as well, that it could well be one of those as well. But I don't know. Intermittent problems like you're having here are tough ones to solve. And it almost feels in a way like a kernel ROM replacement on the motherboard. We don't have such a solution, but if we had some kind of a diagnostic ROM on the motherboard that could start to execute code in a controlled manner and help us understand what's going on, might be beneficial. Now, when you put in the Des Test, by the way, or Dead Test, just for anyone who's watching who doesn't quite know this, what those cartridges do is they send a signal to the PLA, which disables all of the onboard ROMs entirely. Character ROM, kernel ROM, and basic ROM are inaccessible while those cartridges are installed. In fact, the other thing that's the case when you put that in is all of the RAM is disabled except for the first 4K as well. And the VIC is forced to use a particular section of RAM as well. It's because it's emulating the old Commodore Max, which only had 4K of RAM, if I recall. So point being is even with those cartridges in, the data bus is still getting trashed. Something is still, or data and or address bus is getting trashed, even though the ROMs should be out of the question or out of the equation. If the machine had more sockets in it and more of those chips were socketed, obviously a good tactic is just remove everything, but you already know the VIC is good. The CPU seems to be working correctly. I mean, it still could be a problem as well. PLA, generally the failure of those is just the outputs going bad, and you already validated that, like I said. But yeah, tricky one. So I think just start really examining very closely address bus, data bus on the CPU, and just looking for anything that looks slightly out of the ordinary. And if you can kind of compare to your working machine, and then you can zoom in on maybe some bus conflict happening on that one pin or multiple pins, then start isolating the chips on the motherboard by, desoldering those pins. That's probably where I would go next if it were me with that machine in front of me. So hopefully this helped a little bit, but unfortunately you're stuck with a difficult one to fix, and it's definitely not going to be a quick and easy video. All right, back to you, Lee.
Thanks, Adrian. That's really, really good information. Let's go through some of the stuff that you said. So you said that maybe the machine would still boot occasionally with a good basic ROM in. So let's stick a good basic ROM in there and see what happens when we switch it on. Ah, it did it! It did it, and I switched it off just as it started to load. So that proves your hypothesis there that the machine is working intermittently and that the basic ROM is now functioning, but there's something going on that's crashing everything occasionally. And I have off camera, I've done this. I've managed to get it to boot normally, and I've even managed to get it to run the full normal diagnostics, and it passed. The whole diagnostics passed, got right to the end, and then crashed. So that was fun. Yeah, and I like what you say about the bus conflicts being hard to see on these machines. So if there's something that is a fault that isn't a smoking gun type of thing, that just seems to be misbehaving behind the scenes, sometimes where it's interfering with other, it's getting selected at the wrong time, or is selecting itself at the wrong time and messing around on the bus, dumping its data, or messing with the addresses on the bus in a bad way, that can be really difficult to see. Yeah, so that's one of these things that you get with these machines when they go wrong sometimes, and it's really difficult to see the obvious chip. It's not one that's like smoking on the board. You did actually say maybe I should start with the PLA, and then you veered off of that. I think we're heading back towards that, but we'll come back to that in a minute. You said that the machine might work with a cartridge, so let's put the Kung Fu Flash in, and if I keep booting this or resetting this, I have actually got it to run 1943 with the music playing. But not this time, so we'll skip that. But it did run. It ran the game fine and then crashed. Well, it didn't run the game fine. It started the game fine. So, and also you're talking about a kernel ROM replacement, which would have diagnostics on it. I think we should talk to Matt Desmond. Matt, are you interested in something like this? A kernel ROM plugin? That would be cool. Diagnostics on the board. I wonder how much more you could do with that than you can in max mode. Interesting. God, that's something to think about. Right, so I need to show that the ROMs are disabled with a diagnostic cartridge such as DesTest Max running, or Dead Test. So I'm not sure which one this is on. It's probably on Dead Test at the moment. I'll show the chip enable lines. 3, 2, 1, 0. Let's just come to life over there. So that's high. So I think that means it's disabled. That's high, that's disabled, and that's high. So all of the ROMs are disabled with this running. Okay, look, it's working now. I've just reset it. Wonder how far it gets this time. One thing that's important to see here is that the CIAs are both counting up normally. So that's quite interesting. Look at that, it's passed. And it's on to a second round. But if I reset this, oh, it's working now. Why is that working every time? Has this fixed itself or something? No, black screen. What? What on earth is going on? Right, it's not working. I think that Matt Desmond's code is so well written that it's just going to work. Oh, no, there we go. That's the grey border fail. Totally random. So the chip select is working as it should be. The PLA is selecting the right ROMs, or at least disabling them, or the max mode is working. So that is, I think that's when like pin 22 is pulled high, then it disables all of the chips, or maybe that pulled low. I don't know. Someone with more knowledge than me will probably weigh in later. So we know, yeah, as you said, that the VIC-2 is okay, and we're pretty sure the CPU is okay, but it's really difficult to test. And this is what I was going to get onto. We touched on that I tested the PLA against this working good machine, and everything looked normal. Now, I just tried again, and not everything looked normal. Everything looked really messed up. And then I had a look at the CPU as well, and everything looked messed up on there as well. And I noticed that the computer was in like this crashed state. So I don't know if I can get it to do it now. In black screened mode, where the computer's frozen, let's turn this one on as well. And if I go through the CPU, starting with the clock in, okay, just as a a bench. There's the clock in, and they both look the same. The blue signal is the good machine, the yellow signal is the dodgy machine. And let's go to pin 2, which is ready, and both of those are high. The blue one is occasionally being pulled low, so there's some activity on the good machine. And pin 3, which is IRQ. And this is something I noticed when just a little while ago when I was testing both of these against each other. The good machine is low and the bad machine is high. I'll show you that again. And that got me thinking, why didn't I spot that before? And if I turn this off, turn it back on again, and right now it's in a crashed state. It's not doing it this time, but I have managed to get it to go high and then go low like it should. Look, now it's toggling. It's all over the place. So every time you turn this machine on and you probe things, it's showing something different. And when I did the probing of the PLA the first time, it matched up with every single signal. One of them looked a little bit funky, but I thought that could have been just like a dodgy address line somewhere, or just the machine in a different state. But every single signal to me looked the same. So I think I've given you some information that might have led you to a conclusion that might not be what you would have done, that you would have drawn if you'd have had the machine in front of you and done these tests yourself, and you probably would have done them multiple times yourself. With that in mind, I think rather than bother you, let's see if anybody else has got any ideas on what this could be that's causing this, now that we've got more information. Is there anyone? Anybody? Put your hand up. Oh, sorry, Mark, I didn't see you there. Yeah, go on. You might as well have a go.
Oh, yeah. Did you try turning it off and on again?
Well, I was hoping for something a little bit more helpful than that. Yeah, I'm only joking. You go on.
Thank you, Lee. I have an idea for something else that you might want to check out before you go snooping around the data and address buses looking for issues there. It sort of goes back to the start of the video where I think it was the first or second time that you powered on the machine, the SID was making crazy noises. And obviously, as we've seen, the VIC-2 has been outputting all kinds of random garbage. So I think there might actually be something else here, and it goes back to the PLA. Now, I know you already tested the PLA, or at least the chip selects for the ROMs, I believe, and they looked okay. Obviously, the basic ROM was causing issues, and that's where those checksums can really help. And I've seen other people overlook them in the past, so I'm sure I've probably done it myself. So don't feel too bad about that. But yeah, definitely a handy thing to watch out for, as Adrian said. But going back to the PLA, there is one more output on there that I think might be suspect and could explain the issues we're seeing with both the VIC and the SID, and obviously just the random crashes. So looking at the schematics, this is obviously the PLA, and the signal I want you to focus on is pin 12. It's called I/O. If we follow this over, you can see it actually comes to this 74LS139 on the enable pin of this chip. So basically the PLA uses this line to turn this chip on, and that will control the chip selects for the VIC, the SID, color RAM, and the CIAs. It actually loops back around to the second enable input on the 139 and uses a couple of the other address lines to control the CIAs. So my theory is that there may actually be something wrong with the PLA, or at least this I/O line, and that's telling the VIC and the SID to turn on at the wrong times and giving you, crazy noises or random colors. It is also controlled by A10 and A11, so there could be an issue there. So I definitely want to be checking out pin 12 on the PLA, make sure it looks okay there. And I guess while you're at it, check out the 139, make sure the inputs going into this chip look all right, and also obviously the outputs. So I'd say have a look at that I/O line. If it looks a little bit wonky, definitely suspect the PLA. I'm pretty sure it's a 407 board and you've got an 83 PLA in there, so they're known to fail just out of the blue. In fact, I'd probably want to swap that out regardless of if it's still working correctly or not, but I'll leave that up to you. As for the 139, assuming the PLA is perfectly fine, I don't think I've ever seen one of those go bad in a C64. And talking to Adrian, I don't think he's seen one of those go bad either. So I wouldn't necessarily suspect the 139 straight away. If the PLA is okay, I'd definitely go checking the data and address buses, as Adrian suggested first. And if that doesn't turn up anything, maybe the 139, but I don't think there's an issue with the 2 remaining ROMs, given you got the right checksums on those. And yeah, same with the CIAs, you did see the right time of day clocks, so I think they're also okay, at least okay enough at this point. The RAM seems to be good, at least according to Des Test, and I think they were Texas Instruments in that machine, so they're not really known to fail. Pretty sure you've already taken out the VIC-2 and tested it in a different machine. Always a good idea given what's happened to you in the past. And well, the SID, I'd kind of be interested to see what happens if you put the SID back in, whether it does the same crazy sounds or not, but I'll leave that up to you. My money at this point is on the PLA. Good luck.
Mate, I don't need luck when I've got friends like you and Adrian. So, the first thing you asked me to do is put the SID back in and see if it makes crazy sounds so that we can test your theory. And it only seems to do it when it's crashed in certain states. So I wonder if I put the diagnostic cart back in and then just hit reset a bunch of times on that, if we can get that running. Let's put it on normal diagnostics. Oh, I think I might have a dodgy cartridge slot on here as well. Let's just give that a spray. I'm still doing that flashing thing on this power light on this diagnostic board. I wonder if this board is faulty. Okay, so I can't get it to do the whole noisy thing that the SID was doing before, but that I don't think that really means very much, and I think you are onto something. So pin 12 of the PLA is over here, and again I've got the working machine right next door, and pin 12 on that one looks like that, and that is about 4 volts. That's what that's showing. Now let's try pin 12 on this one. Now this is where I think I've slipped up, because although that is going low to high, it's only giving 1 volts, which is not enough for TTL logic. So whether it is the PLA, which, I mean, right at the start we said it's always the PLA, whether it's the PLA or U15, I think you are bang on the money. So let's pop the PLA out, and hopefully that's the fault. There's not enough legs sticking out of the holes to actually do this. I can't wiggle them. It's creaking. That means it's going to come out. It's going to use just a touch of heat, I think, just to be sure and safe, unless this pops it. No. I also need the basic ROM back out of the other board. And let's pop the PLA in here. Ha, it's hot. That's not going to help it, but it's still going to be a good test. Okay. How's your luck? Oh, that's switched on. Everything is good in here. Right, you ready? Here we go. It works. It's not the PLA. Oh. Oh, look at that. It is the PLA. Maybe the being really hot really helped it, but it's crashed. This was one of the times, like Adrian said, that it was going to boot into basic like normal and then crash. And it did. Yes, it's exactly the same. Oh my God, I can't believe that actually fooled me right then. Right at the last. Stick the diagnostics in. Yeah, nothing. Interesting colours. And yeah, Mark nailed it. Well done. Very, very well done. Right. It's the end of the video, but we need to kind of have a satisfying conclusion here and wrap this thing up properly. And I need to point out that although Mark swooped in and stole all of the glory, Adrian was kind of sabotaged by my ineptitude. Earlier in the video, Adrian said this.
Is take a look at the pinout of the PLA. Look at all the outputs on it and check every single output.
And a little bit later in the video, he said this.
What we're looking for when you're looking at the outputs is that the high outputs of all of the PLA chip select lines that go to the various components gets to, I don't know, at least 3.3 volts or higher.
And if I'd listened properly or understood what I was supposed to do a bit better, we wouldn't have needed that pesky Australian. But in the end, we got there as a team.
Yeah, Lee, I told you. You got to check those levels on the PLA. You got to check those levels.
With Adrian and Mark's brains and my camera, I don't know, my soldering iron, we managed to fix the thing together. Anyway, that's the fifth one done, and I really did learn a lot from this one. I've added a few arrows to my quiver, and I think I have a better chance of working my way through the silver labels that are coming up. 5 silver labels coming up on the channel soon. Working my way through those, and without too many mishaps, hopefully. It will mean shorter videos, and it will mean a little bit less entertainment, but nevertheless, it's worth increasing our knowledge together. So thank you, Adrian. And thank you, Mark, especially Mark, for being such a good sport. He took the accent thing really well, like a true gent.
Cool, blimey, it is always the PLA, isn't it?
So yeah, Mark Van Dyke, thank you very much. Thank you everybody for watching. If you like this video, you know what to do. Oh no, that's what Adrian says. Thank you for watching. I've really enjoyed this one, and thank you to Adrian and Mark. And I'll see you in the next one. Like and subscribe. Oh dear.